Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. This is Friday, the 6th day of March in the year of our Lord 2026. My beat is war today. War is obviously the most important story in the world right now, as President Trump unilaterally, it seems, decided to make war against a nation that apparently had not harmed the U.S. and was not a threat to the U.S. Why then did President Trump do it? I'll give my thoughts on that, but first let's look at what he actually did. The U.S. spent a few months building up forces in the Middle East region while negotiating or pretending to negotiate a settlement. The U.S. demands became increasingly more difficult for the Iranians to comply with, including give up the use of peaceful nuclear power except for medical purposes, surrender all enriched uranium that you currently possess and allow international inspection, give up all offensive missiles and drones, cease all support for your terrorist proxies across the region. Finally, you must change your head of state, give up your oppressive theocratic government. Well, those are some bitter pills for a sovereign country to swallow. Some people believe they were designed to lure the Iranians into complacency, while a serious attack was always the plan. The battle forces assembling in the region would have said to me, were I a head of state in Iran, prepare for serious war. I would have made offensive preparations such as moving my leadership, especially myself, to a safe area. Iran didn't do that. And with the Ayatollah's rejection of the peace proposal on Friday, he was dead within 24 hours. Once again, the U.S. war machine, the high-tech warfighting ability of the U.S. are amazing, and they're a demonstration for the whole world. The two carrier battle groups, including the largest warship in the world, 200 fighter jets, which, by the way, folks, cost $10,000 for each hour of flight operation. So if they were all in the air at once, which they often were, that's $2 million per hour. The last time I looked these figures up, it cost about $25 million per day to keep a carrier battle group at sea and in-flight operations. 50,000, excuse me, folks, 50,000 U.S. personnel, we are told, are currently engaged in combat. 6 U.S. soldiers are known dead, having been killed in Kuwait from an Iranian missile or drone strike. It seems that the Iranians misread the reactions of their neighbors because they reacted by attacking everyone in the region. Who do you make war against? Everybody, I guess, thus driving the entire region into a military alliance with the U.S. The U.S., at the time of this recording, has launched over 2,000 sorties against Iran, and the Iranians have fired over 500 ballistic missiles, over 2,000 drones. About 10% of each of them get through. Iran attacked U.S. bases and civilian targets in countries including Israel, the Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq. Only one missile been fired at Turkey so far, even though the U.S. has a large base in Turkey. These figures don't consider the Israeli attacks, which of course were supplied by the U.S. for the most part. The arrangement was apparently that Israel would attack command and control systems and assassinate personnel, including the head of state, while the U.S. attacked the ability of Iran to retaliate with missiles and drones. So, does the President of the United States have the constitutional authority to take the nation to war? My short answer is no. But ever since the Korean War, the U.S. has held the view that as Commander-in-Chief, the President can constitutionally command the military to do whatever he wants. That's not my view. It was not the view of the founders. The term commander-in-chief means that once war is declared by Congress, he runs the war. Our system of government does not allow one individual to put the entire population at risk by unilaterally and individually making war. What about the War Powers Resolution passed in 1973, which gives the president the authority to commit troops to battle anywhere in the world for 90 days without congressional approval? Anyway, he said he did get congressional approval because he briefed the 8 leaders of Congress known as the Gang of Eight. My opinion is that the War Powers Resolution itself is unconstitutional. No one seems to care anymore what that document says or what it means. Very few want to be limited by its words, so to prevent the restraint it requires, Congress passes a resolution essentially amending it. And as I said, that in and of itself is unconstitutional. However, I admit that the resolution is what he used, even though it is misused, misapplied. It gives him a pretty good argument for unlimited power. Most in Congress will no longer argue that the president does not have authority to do what he has done. So having looked at what he did, now we ask, why did he do it? Part of the answer was the usual, i.e. the Iranians are terrible people who arrest a protester one day, hang him the next day. Prison guards routinely rape virgin girls who are arrested by the moral police because they believe that when they murder the girls, they will be barred from heaven if they've been raped. Pretty sick, but most of the explanation he gave had to do with nuclear weapons, although just a few months ago he, quote, obliterated their nuclear program. They were, he said, rebuilding it. The International Atomic Energy Agency of the UN said that Iran was enriching uranium up to 60%. Only nuclear-armed countries did that. Iran was supplying the whole hostile world, including Russia, with drone and missile technology. My understanding is that Iran's hypersonic missile technology came from China. There is an elephant in the room, of course. That elephant was not mentioned, and it is Israel. This entire war is so obviously at the behest of Israel. I can't understand why the U.S. is not at least a little bit humiliated by it. Netanyahu said publicly that what Israel and the U.S. are doing, something he has dreamed of doing for 40 years. The real reason diplomacy could not work was not any of the things listed, but something Marco Rubio announced to reporters on Monday. The Secretary of State, Mr. Rubio, made it very, very clear why we did what we did. Quote, "It was abundantly clear that if Iran come under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. We knew there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack on American forces. We knew that if we didn't preemptively go after Iran before Israel launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties," end quote. So, if you reason this out and apply logic, the reason we attacked Iran, killed many civilians, destroyed much infrastructure, was that if we hadn't, our ally, our special ally, would have gone rogue and launched its own war, thus exposing the U.S. to much higher casualties. In that sense, then, Operation Epic Fury, the attack on Iran, was an act of self-defense against Israel. The nation of Israel puts Israel first, so I wonder why the U.S. won't consider doing the same for the U.S. Why won't U.S. leaders tell our ally, you launch your jets, which you got from us, you will lose all American support, all American bases in the Middle East, or you can simply restrain your murderous impulses and remain our ally? The answer to that question probably explains the war, but who knows the answer for sure? Maybe the answer is in the Epstein files, folks, but who knows? I know that when JFK gave Israel a firm no on their development of nuclear weapons, he didn't live very long. LBJ quickly reversed his decision. So whatever the relationship between U.S. presidents and Israeli leaders throughout Israel's history, President Trump is inclined to listen to Bibi and the neocons in America rather than his MAGA base. He promised the MAGA people he would not start another disastrous, stupid, pointless, and very costly Middle East war, but here we are. It appears for the second time in President Trump's second term, he used negotiations as a cover for a decision already made to go to war. Launching a military strike during negotiations could have long-lasting effect on negotiations of destroying trust in U.S. diplomacy, so it's a risky proposition. Another reason for this that I admit is not obvious But this attack is an attack on China and Russia as well as the other BRICS nations. The U.S. does not want World War III in the traditional sense because in today's nuclear world that would result in a worldwide catastrophe with no winners, only losers. Instead, today's war is about trade, money, commerce, etc. Who gets to run the world order of today? World orders come and world orders go. They have throughout the centuries. In fact, the world order that emerged in 1648, formed by the Peace of Westphalia, or the treaty by that name, makes the most sense to me. It ended the 30 Years' War in which Europe was devastated and its people were starving. It lasted from 1648 to 1803 when it was destroyed by Napoleon Bonaparte. The treaty involved much of old Europe, including the Holy Roman Empire. It allowed a world in which nations agreed they would stop unprovoked attacks on each other and would not assassinate each other's leaders. It brought peace and allowed the people of Europe to prosper and to be fed again eventually. World orders and peace agreements always break down into violence and bloodshed. Today, the new order of the world is trying to form. It has devolved into proxy wars, economic wars, cyber wars, biological wars, sabotage wars, and information wars. Russia and China resent U.S. dominance and attempt to topple it, while the U.S. will hold it by any means necessary. In conclusion, folks, I don't know anything about this war for certain. I just try to use logic to make the best guess possible. I know that China has stopped export of oil and gas, has restricted its domestic use. China imports 11 million barrels per day, 45% of which come through the Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Perhaps Chinese tankers could buy the new U.S.-provided insurance, thus bypassing Lloyd's of London, which has run shipping for over 100 years. Could that result in a new U.S.-China-Russia alliance? Well, who knows, folks? Who knows? Finally, folks, I close with the words of the great Ron Paul, now 90 years of age, but as wise as ever. Quote, "Here's a plan. In this today, return the destroyed U.S. bases to the countries where they are located and just come home. That is what a real America First movement looks like," end quote. Well, that's the way I see it. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.